Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here asking you to click like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment saying where you're listening from. This really helps my video go out to a wider audience, so it's much appreciated. Now, with that said, we've got a lot of historical content to cover, so let's get down to business. In a bustling village market in Haiti in 1980, a woman named Angelina Narcisse was going about her day when a man approached her. He looked gaunt, his eyes haunted, but there was something familiar about him. He called her by a childhood nickname, one only her closest family knew. The man claimed to be her brother, Clervius Narcisse, but that was impossible. Clervius had died and been buried 18 years earlier, in 1962. His death wasn't a vague memory either. He didn't pass away in a village in the middle of nowhere, where no one who knew him saw it happen. On April 30th, 1962, Clervius had checked himself into the American-run Albert Schweitzer Hospital, suffering from a fever, body aches, and coughing up blood. His condition deteriorated rapidly with a host of baffling symptoms: hypothermia, low blood pressure, and a tingling sensation that spread through his body. 2 days later, American-trained doctors pronounced him dead. His sister Angelina identified his body. He was buried. Yet here he was, nearly 2 decades later, sharing intimate family secrets that no stranger could possibly know. Clervius told a story that seemed to crawl out of the darkest corners of folklore. He claimed he had been conscious but paralyzed through his own death and burial. He remembered being dug up from his grave by a Bokor, a voodoo sorcerer, who then beat him and led him away to a sugar plantation. There, alongside other mindless captives, he was forced to work for 2 years in a hazy, dreamlike state. He only escaped when another zombie fought back and slew their captor, freeing them from the sorcerer's control. For the next 16 years he wandered Haiti in fear, only daring to return home after learning that the brother he believed had arranged the ordeal had died. The story of Clervius Narcisse, the most well-documented case of its kind, forces us to move beyond fiction and ask a serious question. What exactly is a Haitian zombie, and could such a thing actually be real? The zombie of Haitian lore isn't a flesh-eating monster, it's a victim. The concept is deeply woven into the spiritual fabric of Haitian voodoo, which understands the human soul as a dual entity. According to this belief, there are 2 spirits that live inside a person, and they are separate and distinct. There is the big good angel, which is the universal life force that animates the body. But there is also the little good angel, which is the seat of your personality, your memories, your character, everything that makes you you. According to belief, a Bokor, a black magician who operates on the fringes of the formal voodoo practice, doesn't reanimate a corpse. Instead, the Bokor steals the little good angel from a living person, often through a magical powder or ritual. This act splits the soul, leaving behind a soulless body, which the Bokor can then control. The captured soul, known as the zombie astral, can be stored in a bottle or jar and used to enhance the sorcerer's power. The physical zombie is a shell, an automaton with no will, no memory, and no identity, forced to serve its new master. This belief didn't emerge from a vacuum. It's a direct and disturbing reflection of Haiti's tumultuous history. During the French colonial period, the island, then called Saint-Domingue, spent time as the world's most profitable colony by a fairly substantial margin. This profit was driven by the extremely brutal conditions on the island's sugar plantations. For the African people who made up the vast majority of the population, the only true path to freedom was a spiritual return to their ancestral homeland. The zombie mythologized the ultimate terror, a state that denied even this final escape. To become a zombie was to be trapped in your body forever, dispossessed of your very soul, and forced into eternal mindless labor. Under this theory, the soul would never have the chance to make a spiritual return, thus instilling extreme fear of zombie status. Even after Haiti's successful revolution, the zombie remained a powerful cultural force, evolving into a form of social control. Zombification isn't seen as a random act, but as a severe punishment for those who violate the community's social code. Clervius Narcisse, for example, was allegedly targeted over a land dispute and for having abandoned his children. In rural areas where government influence was weak, clandestine secret societies sometimes act as an informal justice system, and the threat of zombification is their ultimate sanction. The case of Clervius Narcisse was so well documented that it dragged the zombie out of folklore and into the realm of scientific inquiry. In the early 1980s, a young Harvard ethnobotanist named Wade Davis traveled to Haiti to investigate. His journey, chronicled in his famous book The Serpent and the Rainbow, sought a material explanation for the phenomenon. He didn't believe in soul-stealing magic, but he did believe in the phenomenon, and that chemistry might offer the solution. Davis plunged into the secretive world of the Bokors, and after much difficulty, managed to obtain samples of the powder they allegedly used to create zombies. His analysis revealed a complex and bizarre cocktail of ingredients, including parts of toads, lizards, human remains, and various plants. But the key ingredient, he claimed, was a potent neurotoxin called tetrodotoxin, which is found in several species of pufferfish. Davis proposed a sophisticated two-step process. First, the Bokor applies the tetrodotoxin-laced powder to the victim's skin. The powder contains irritants that create abrasions, allowing the toxin to enter the bloodstream. Tetrodotoxin works by blocking sodium channels in nerve cells, preventing them from firing. This induces a state of profound paralysis that perfectly mimics death. The victim's heart rate and breathing slow to nearly undetectable levels. Their body temperature drops, and their lips may turn blue, all symptoms reported in Narcisse's case. Crucially, the victim can remain fully conscious, aware of everything happening as they are pronounced deceased and buried alive. The second step occurs after the Bokor exhumes the victim from their grave. To revive them and maintain control, the Bokor force feeds them a paste containing Datura stramonium, known as zombie cucumber in Haiti. The psychoactive compounds in Datura induce delirium, amnesia, and a state of high suggestibility. This, Davis argued, is what keeps the zombie in a will-less, confused state, easily controlled and put to work against his or her will. Wade Davis's theory was revolutionary. It offered a plausible, scientific framework for one of the world's most enduring mysteries. However, it remains highly controversial, and today, there is no scientific consensus that zombies, as described by Davis, actually exist. The primary challenge to his work came from other scientists. When toxicologists analyzed the powder samples Davis brought back, they found, at best, only insignificant traces of tetrodotoxin. In essence, there was far too little to cause the extreme effects he had described. Critics also pointed out that reliably administering a near-lethal, but not fatal, dose of such a powerful poison through the skin would be almost impossible. They noted that to do this would essentially require the precision of an anesthesiologist. To put this in perspective, this is a medical specialty that takes about 15 years of education. This scientific skepticism has led to alternative explanations. Many researchers now believe that reported zombie cases may be tragic instances of misidentification. In a country with limited access to mental health care, individuals suffering from conditions like catatonic schizophrenia or severe disabilities might wander away from their homes. With their dazed appearance and lack of volition, They could easily be mistaken for a long-lost relative who was believed to be dead. Thus, when they return, they could be absorbed into the powerful cultural narrative of the zombie. Another compelling theory centers on the power of psychology. The cultural belief in zombies is pervasive and deeply felt in parts of Haiti. For someone who believes in the power of a bokor, the psychological trauma an encounter with one of these dark magicians may completely shatter their sense of self. This terrifying ordeal, perhaps combined with the administration of disorienting substances, could induce a psychotic state where the victim accepts their new identity as a zombie. In this view, zombification is less a pharmacological process and more a product of profound psychological manipulation rooted in cultural belief. But let's get back to the most famous zombie case of them all before we close out this segment. There's no solid evidence proving the man who reappeared in 1980 was truly Clervius Narcisse. His identity was accepted based on family recognition, not medical or genetic proof. Poor records and the lack of verification leave open the possibility that he was an imposter or a case of mistaken identity. That said, supporters of the zombification theory note that his family had widely accepted him as the original Clervius and that he had distinct memories that proved this. Given the poor record-keeping in Haiti, it seems as though there was a dispute about where he was actually buried, so no one could just go and simply check the grave and get a quick answer. Notably, as a bit of a postscript, zombification also has a legal basis in Haiti till this day. Zombification is illegal in Haiti under Article 246 of the Penal Code, which treats inducing a permanent lethargic state as an attempt on someone's life. If a person is buried in that state, regardless of whether they live or not, the law treats the accused as being potentially guilty of slaying the zombified person. Though the law doesn't use the word zombie, it covers the same actions described in Haitian folklore. Ultimately, the Haitian zombie remains an enigma, a complex phenomenon where culture, history, pharmacology, and psychology intersect. While the evidence for a specific zombie powder is weak, the reality of the zombie in the Haitian imagination is undeniable. In a 17th century cemetery in the Polish village of Pien, archaeologists uncovered something deeply unsettling. It wasn't a tomb of riches or the grave of a king, but the small skeleton of a child, no older than 7. The child had been buried face down, a practice meant to make the deceased bite the dust if they tried to rise. And under its foot, securing it to the earth, was a triangular iron padlock. This small, locked grave is a powerful entry point into one of history's most visceral fears, the fear of the undead. This was a specific category of interment known as an apotropaic burial, a set of practices designed with one terrifying purpose in mind: to prevent the rise of a vampire. When a community feared one of its own might return, they employed a surprisingly consistent toolkit of post-mortem interventions. These practices, while gruesome, were rooted in a specific and pragmatic logic aimed at physically incapacitating the corpse. The most direct method was decapitation. The belief was straightforward. A body without a head couldn't see its way back to the world of the living. The head was often placed between the legs or at the feet, a final, definitive act of disorientation. Another common practice was face-down burial. Folkloric tradition held that if a revenant interred this way tried to claw its way out, it would only dig itself deeper into the earth. The child in Pien was buried in this manner, a symbolic and physical act to keep the supposed vampire bound to the grave. In other cases, the goal was to pin the body down. Skeletons have been found in Bulgaria, with heavy iron plowshares hammered through their chests, and in the Czech Republic, bodies were weighted down with massive rocks. In some cases, a sharp blade would be placed across the deceased's throat, positioned so that any attempt to sit up would result in decapitation. Sometimes the threat was believed to come from the mouth. In a 16th century mass plague grave in Venice, Italy, excavators found the skull of a woman with a brick jammed into her jaw. This is believed to have been done to prevent the woman from rising from the grave and releasing miasma, or bad air, from her infected lungs. Historians and scientists have tried to figure out what drove communities to take such drastic actions. The likely answer lies in a world grappling with death without the benefit of modern science. Before germ theory, the natural processes of decomposition were terrifying and easily misinterpreted. A corpse bloating with gas could appear well fed, and disturbingly, the dark purge fluid that sometimes escapes the nose and mouth could be mistaken for fresh blood. The apparent post-mortem growth of hair and nails and the slippage of skin could all be seen as signs of a horrifying, unnatural vitality. These misunderstood biological processes provided the evidence that a body was not truly at rest. This fear was weaponized during times of crisis, particularly during epidemics. A powerful belief took hold across Europe. The first person to die in an outbreak was somehow responsible for its continuation. This patient zero became a supernatural scapegoat. It was thought they would rise from the grave to prey on their surviving family and neighbors, spreading the sickness. The apotropaic burial, then, became a form of ritualized public health. It was a tangible action a community could take when faced with an invisible, unstoppable force like cholera or the plague. For a long time, it was assumed that the targets of these rituals were outsiders. Perhaps foreigners, criminals, the unbaptized, or people with physical or mental disabilities who weren't accepted in their communities during life. But modern science has profoundly challenged this theory. An interesting scientific study at a cemetery in Poland used radiogenic strontium isotope analysis on the tooth enamel of individuals in both vampire and normal graves. This analysis reveals the geology of the region where a person grew up. The results were stunning. The people buried this way were locals. In another major study, also in Poland, scientists examined hundreds of skeletons for signs of disease and disability. It found that the individuals in apotropaic graves were no more or less afflicted with noticeable disabilities than the general population. These findings force a more nuanced conclusion. The people being targeted were not necessarily outsiders or disabled. They were neighbors. They were family. Their otherness likely came not from their origin or appearance, but from the circumstances of their death. The fear wasn't the universal unease of the stranger, but a much more wicked terror. It was the fear of the familiar face of friends and family turned monstrous and unrecognizable. This fear was not born in a vacuum. It was rooted in the deep soil of Slavic and broader European folklore. The aristocratic, caped figure of modern fiction bears little resemblance to the revenants of old. The traditional Slavic vampire, known as an upir or the Romanian strigoi, was a reanimated corpse, often described as bloated and ruddy from feeding. These folk traditions also provided a detailed instruction manual for the destruction of these reanimated beings. To stop a strigoi, one had to exhume the body, drive a stake of oak or yew through its heart, decapitate it, or stuff its mouth with garlic. The striking parallels between these folkloric prescriptions and the archaeological evidence reveal a direct and powerful link between belief and ritual practice. Ultimately, anti-vampire burials are the material remains of a battle for control. In a world besieged by forces it could not understand, communities fought back with the tools they had: ritual, tradition, and an understanding of how to disable a human body. These graves are a testament to the power of belief to shape human behavior in the face of existential terror. Hey everyone, Jimmy here with a quick reminder to hit the notification bell and drop a comment saying where you're listening from. Also, don't forget that you can support my work for as little as $1 a month through the YouTube membership by clicking that join button. In the annals of American folklore, there are countless tales of haunted houses and vengeful spirits. However, very few of them have a future president playing a major role in the legend. It all began in 1817 on the quiet, prosperous farm of John Bell Sr. in Robertson County, Tennessee. He was a respected church elder whose family had enjoyed 13 years of peace on the frontier before their world unraveled into a nightmare from which they would never fully escape. The first sign that something was wrong on the Bell farm wasn't a ghostly wail or a rattling chain, but a bizarre creature spotted in a cornfield. John Bell described it as having the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. He fired a shot at it, and the creature simply vanished. Soon after, other strange omens appeared on the periphery of their lives. John's son, Drury, saw an enormous, unknown bird perched on a fence, while his daughter Betsy witnessed the apparition of a young girl in a green dress swinging from a tree limb. Other family members reported being followed at a distance at night by a large, menacing black dog. These external oddities soon breached the walls of the family home. It started with faint scratching and knocking sounds on the cabin's exterior. Night after night, the sounds grew louder, more insistent. The family would rush outside, weapons in hand, only to find nothing there. Before long, the sounds moved inside, manifesting as the gnawing of rats on bedposts, the ferocious snarling of invisible fighting dogs, and the heavy drag of chains. Soon the family began to hear faint whispers, like a feeble old woman singing hymns. Over weeks and months, this voice grew stronger, clearer, and more articulate, until it could carry on intelligent conversations from anywhere in the house. When asked who it was, the entity offered a confounding array of origins. It claimed to be the spirit from a disturbed Native American burial mound, a ghost searching for a lost tooth buried beneath the house, or a demon from hell. When the spirit claimed to be an astral projection of a neighbor named Kate Batts, the name Kate was adopted by the family and the community, and the entity seemed to embrace it. This being was said to demonstrate uncanny abilities, once repeating 2 different sermons word for word as they were being delivered simultaneously 13 miles apart. It knew the secret deeds and gossip of every family in the community and delighted in religious arguments, showing a deep knowledge of the Bible. Its attacks were cruelly specific, focusing almost entirely on John Bell and his youngest daughter, Betsy. Betsy was subjected to brutal physical assaults. She was slapped, pinched, stuck with pins, and had her hair violently pulled by an invisible force. Kate also developed an obsession with Betsy's love life, vehemently opposing her engagement to a young man named Joshua Gardner. The entity tormented the couple relentlessly until Betsy, broken by the harassment, finally ended the engagement in 1821. The entity reserved its deepest malice for the family patriarch John Bell, whom it mockingly called Old Jack. It cursed him constantly and openly vowed to eliminate him. Under this supernatural assault, John's health began to fail. He suffered from facial twitching, had trouble swallowing, and was eventually racked by debilitating seizures. A bizarre and psychologically twisted move, the entity showed nothing but kindness to John's wife, Lucy, calling her perfect in every way. As word of the haunting spread, the Bell Farm became a grim tourist attraction. Hundreds of people, from neighbors to curious travelers, camped on the property hoping to witness the phenomena for themselves. The legend's most famous visitor was a man who was not yet president, but was already a national hero, General Andrew Jackson. According to the story, Jackson arrived from Nashville in 1819 with an entourage, determined to investigate. As his wagon approached the Bell property, it inexplicably ground to a halt, the horses unable to pull it an inch further. Later that evening, one of Jackson's men, a self-proclaimed witch tamer, boasted that his silver bullet would destroy any evil spirit. Immediately, the so-called witch tamer began to scream in agony, claiming he was being beaten and stuck with pins before being violently kicked out of the house by an unseen force. The terrified party supposedly fled the farm the next morning, with Jackson supposedly declaring that he would fight the British Army again rather than encounter the witch. Notably, there is significant historical doubt whether Jackson was involved in this story at all. The future president kept extensive personal papers documenting every aspect of his life and never once mentioned the Bell Witch or anything like it. By the fall of 1820, Kate's relentless torment had taken its final toll. John Bell's health completely collapsed, and he was confined to his bed. On December 20th, 1820, after slipping into a coma the day before, John Bell died. In the medicine cupboard, the family found a strange vial filled with a dark liquid that none of them recognized. In a highly disturbing move, John Bell Jr., deeply suspicious, tested a small amount on the family cat, which died almost instantly. At that moment, the triumphant voice of the entity filled the room, boasting that the apparition had been responsible for everything. When the vial was thrown into the fireplace, it erupted in an eerie blue flame and shot up the chimney. The entity's final act of desecration came at John Bell's funeral, where it laughed and loudly sang rude drinking songs until the last mourner had left the graveyard. With its primary target dead, the haunting largely ceased. Kate made a few more appearances before bidding the family farewell with a promise to return in 7 years. The entity did return in 1828, not to torment, but to converse with John Bell Jr. about the past, present, and future, reportedly delivering prophecies and a promise to return in 107 years. The spirit didn't return in 1935, and if it did, no one was paying attention. Notably, the story as we know it was cemented in 1894 by Martin Ingram's book, An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch. And yes, you know it's definitely a true story when you have to call it an authenticated history. Skeptics point out the lack of contemporary written accounts of many of the most bizarre elements of the haunting before Ingram's book, which was published over 70 years after the events. While the actual death of John Sr. definitely did occur, and there was contemporary documents of supernatural activities, Ingram's book went so much further. Many historians now believe Ingram fabricated much of the tale after finding out the last surviving immediate member of the family passed away in 1890. As for what actually happened, there's contemporary evidence of elements of the haunting, and people reportedly did hear voices when around both Betsy and John Jr. One modern theory suggests that the entire thing was a hoax put together by the two, though the reasoning for this is unclear. Some have speculated that Betsy and her brother started the hoax to get her out of the engagement. As for John Bell's symptoms, some have suggested he may have had a neurological disorder which wasn't understood at the time, or that he may have actually been poisoned over time. Whatever the case, the Bell Witch would go on to be one of the most influential ghost stories in American history. The date is February 22nd, 1803. For the fishermen of Japan's Hitachi province, it's a day like any other, until they spot something impossible drifting on the choppy Pacific waves. It's not a fishing boat, nor any kind of vessel they recognize. It's a round, covered object, bobbing ominously in the water. Their curiosity overcoming their fear, they row out and tow the strange craft to shore. What they discover inside will become one of Japan's most perplexing legends, a story that blurs the line between history, folklore, and a potential encounter with another world. This is the story of the Utsuro Bune, a hollow ship which some claim was transporting a being not from this world. The tale of the Utsuro Bune is preserved in several contemporary texts from Japan's Edo period. The details vary slightly between accounts, but they paint a remarkably consistent and specific picture of the event. The vessel itself was an object of profound strangeness. It was circular, measuring about 10 feet high and 20 feet wide. The shape reminded the witnesses of a traditional incense burner or a large rice pot. The upper half was crafted from red lacquered rosewood, but the lower half was reinforced with brazen metal plates, perhaps to protect it from rocks. The top was fitted with windows made of glass or crystal, a rarity at the time, which were sealed with tree resin and protected by bars. Peering inside, the fishermen saw strange, unintelligible writing decorating the walls. When a hatch on the vessel opened, the mystery only deepened. A young woman, estimated to be between 18 and 20 years old, emerged. She was petite, standing under 5 feet tall, but her appearance was unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. She had pale pink skin, and her hair and eyebrows were a vivid red. Her long hair was even more peculiar, lengthened with artificial white extensions that seemed to be made of fur or powdered fabric. She was dressed in elegant flowing garments made from an unknown smooth material. The woman was polite and courteous, but she spoke a language no one could understand, and she couldn't comprehend their Japanese. She clutched a pale rectangular box which she protected fiercely, refusing to let anyone touch it no matter how kindly or insistently they asked. Unsure what to do, the fishermen ultimately decided to place the woman back in her vessel and push her back out to sea, where she drifted away, never to be seen again. To a modern observer, the fisherman's decision seems incredibly cruel and highly questionable. However, the answer about why they did this lies not in a lack of compassion, but in the rigid political reality of early 19th century Japan. The incident occurred during the height of the Edo period, under the Tokugawa shogunate's policy of sakoku, or the chained country. For nearly 200 years, Japan had been in a state of self-imposed isolation. The shogunate, fearing the destabilizing influence of Christianity and foreign powers, had outlawed almost all contact with the outside world. Under the laws of sakoku, Japanese citizens were forbidden from traveling abroad or returning home if they had left, on pain of death. Any unauthorized foreigner who landed on Japanese soil was to be dealt with swiftly. The only sanctioned European presence was a small contingent of Dutch traders confined to the artificial island of Dejima in Nagasaki Harbor, hundreds of miles away. For the fishermen in Hitachi, harboring a foreigner, especially one so strange, would have been an illegal and dangerous act. In one account, a village elder specifically warns that reporting the incident to the authorities would bring trouble and great expense upon them. The sheer strangeness of the Utsuro Bune incident has invited speculation for over 2 centuries. The first formal investigation was conducted in 1844 by the writer Kyokute Bakken, who had compiled the most famous version of the tale in Toen Shosetsu. Consulting a book about Russian culture, this scholar noted that some Russian women had red hair and used white powder in their hair. He speculated that the mysterious visitor could have been a Russian, British, or even an American princess. As the part about American princesses may indicate, Japan was still closed off to the outside world at this time. Of course, the most popular modern theory is that the Utsuro Bune was an extraterrestrial spacecraft. This idea gained traction in the mid-20th century, largely because the illustrations from the Edo period texts bear an uncanny resemblance to flying saucers. Proponents of this theory argue that the vessel's advanced materials, the unknown script, and the woman's otherworldly appearance are all evidence of a close encounter. While critics point out that the craft only ever floated and never flew, the visual power of the drawings is undeniable. Still others believe that the story isn't meant to be taken literally at all, and that it's supposed to be a cautionary tale from Sakoku-era Japan. The moral of the story being, if you see someone foreign-looking washed up on the shores, push them back out to sea like the fishermen did. Notably, in some versions of the tale, the village elder tells the fishermen that if they didn't cast the foreign-looking woman away, the whole village would have been in trouble. More than 200 years after it allegedly washed ashore, the Utsurobune continues to captivate us. Its power lies in its perfect ambiguity. It's grounded in enough historical documentation to feel very real, yet it's filled with enough mystery to defy any simple explanation. It started with a single photograph that seemed to capture the impossible. Tiny, delicate fairies dancing in broad daylight around a young girl at the bottom of an English garden. In the summer of 1917, 9-year-old Frances Griffiths and her 16-year-old cousin, Elsie Wright, staged this otherworldly scene by a stream in Cottingley, Yorkshire. The resulting image, showing Frances with several winged, fairy-like figures, looked so enchanting and convincing that it would soon spark a sensation. What began as a private prank between two mischievous cousins quickly spiraled into one of the most famous hoaxes of the 20th century. This hoax would eventually rope in eminent figures like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. Frances and Elsie often played by a garden brook in Cottingley and claimed that real fairies lived there. In mid-1917, to prove their story, the cousins borrowed Elsie's father's camera and snapped 2 photographs that appeared to show them interacting with tiny winged beings. One image featured Frances posed with several dancing fairies, and another showed Elsie holding out her hand to a small creature. Elsie's father, Arthur Wright, was an avid photographer and immediately suspected trickery. He knew his daughter's artistic talent and figured they must have used cardboard cutouts. Arthur was so sure it was a prank that he refused to lend them his camera again. And yeah, I'm just gonna say here that Arthur sounds like a total stick in the mud. Elsie's mother, Polly, however, found the pictures charming and wondered if they might be genuine evidence of the supernatural. For 2 years, the fairy photographs remained a local curiosity. The turning point came in mid-1919 when Polly Wright took the images to a meeting of the Theosophical Society in nearby Bradford. The topic that evening was fairy life, a subject perfectly suited to the photographs. The images captivated members of the society, including leading theosophist Edward Gardner. Gardner, eager to find proof of mystical and spiritual phenomena, saw the Cottingley pictures as timely evidence supporting the society's belief in a world beyond the ordinary. A photographic expert examined the prints and concluded that the photos showed no signs of tampering. This expert could confirm only that the images weren't double exposures or darkroom tricks, but he stopped short of declaring they had actually caught fairies on film. Encouraged by these assessments and not caring for the nuance, Gardner began using the fairy photos in lectures and even sold prints of them to fascinated audiences. The photographs soon appeared in a spiritualist magazine, which is where they caught the eye of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He was not only a famed author, but also a devoted spiritualist, deeply interested in life beyond the veil of death. By 1920, Britain knew him as an outspoken believer in psychic phenomena, and he was in the midst of writing an article about fairies for the Christmas issue of a popular magazine. Overjoyed at this apparent proof of fairy folk, Conan Doyle reached out to the Wright family to obtain permission to publish the Cottingley photographs. And just to give some context here, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was basically the Fox Mulder of the time. The man wanted to believe. Conan Doyle's endorsement launched the Cottingley fairies into international fame, and when the magazine published the photos in December 1920, the issue sold out within days. Public reaction was decidedly mixed. Many people were enchanted by this apparent proof of a hidden magical realm, praising the girl's innocence, but skeptics immediately suspected a hoax. Sharp-eyed critics noted that the fairy figures looked suspiciously like magazine illustrations and suggested the photos were nothing more than cut-out drawings. Nonetheless, the fairy fever was infectious for those who wanted to believe. Even those who doubted the photos couldn't readily explain how two kids with a simple box camera had produced them. For many, it felt easier, and certainly more delightful, to accept that perhaps fairies were real than to believe that photographs, a trusted medium at the time, could lie. The timing was also perfect. The nation, reeling from conflict, was eager for an innocent escape from grief and loss, so a tale of fairies found a receptive audience. At Conan Doyle's urging, Francis and Elsie produced 3 more fairy photographs in 1920, and he even compiled the story and pictures into a book. The long-awaited confession came in 1983, a full 66 years after the first prank photo was taken. By then, Elsie Wright was in her 80s, and finally ready to set the record straight. She and Francis co-authored an article admitting that the fairy photographs had been clever fakes, though they claimed that they had indeed interacted with fairies as children. The cousins revealed exactly how they did it. Back in 1917, Elsie had copied drawings of dancing fairies from a popular children's book of the time. They also traced pictures of princesses and drew wings on them to make them into fairies. The girls cut out these fairy figures, propped them up with hat pins in the grass, then took the magical-looking photographs before disposing of the paper props in the stream. In short, there were no tiny supernatural beings, just artfully arranged cardboard illustrations discarded in a questionable manner. When asked why they hadn't confessed sooner, Elsie and Francis admitted that they were embarrassed to tell the truth. In essence, so many prominent people had believed in them. As Elsie put it later, they were just 2 village kids who didn't dare contradict Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, so they kept quiet. Francis similarly said they never imagined the prank would be taken so seriously. It was merely a bit of fun that got out of hand. She also believed people were fooled simply because they wanted to be, and what was intended to be a brief trick to their parents became a worldwide sensation. Despite the obvious mystery being solved, there's something perhaps more meaningful below the surface. Why people were so willing to accept these fairies as real. One major factor was the cultural mood of the time. In the aftermath of the great conflict of all time, grieving and disillusioned people were longing for hope, innocence, and reassurance that unseen wonders might still exist. The fairies of Cottingley offered a welcome escape, a comforting hint that perhaps magic was real, just when the world needed something to believe in. Another reason the hoax took hold was the perceived credibility of the sources and technology involved. Photography was still a technical craft in the early 20th century, and many assumed that children couldn't fake something like this. Further, multiple photographic experts analyzed the stills over the year and confirmed that the early-day equivalent of Photoshop wasn't used. If experts and eminent thinkers believed the photographs were genuine, then that was good enough to accept the possibility that they were.